Welcome to Power of the Tribe podcast. I'm your host, John Connors. I'm also the founder and head instructor of Connors Martial Arts here in Norwood, Mass. We teach Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, Muay Thai kickboxing, mixed martial arts. Come down, come see us, and we'll make your life better. Your waist will be thinner. Your posture will improve. Your skin will be supple.
Vision improves.
Vision improves. People will like you more. Your charisma will increase.
Double.
How you doing, Dan?
Fine.
I'm sensing that. I'm sensing you're slightly below a 7. Am I right?
Yeah, I'm not feeling great. I think we're past joking about coronavirus now, though. Like as it spreads.
Oh, we can't joke about that anymore.
Remarks anymore.
Yeah.
It's making impacts, right? It's impacting my life now. This is again, the podcast comes out it'll be a little later when everyone hears this. But
March 6th, 2020.
my son was going to go to China. That early on got canceled.
That got canceled,
My daughter was going to go to Paris with her high school. That got canceled. I'm supposed to go to Seattle in about 10 days. That's looking a little iffy.
Really?
Yeah.
Why? Seattle?
Seattle's a hotbed now.
It is.
Yeah.
Huh.
So they're canceling. The schools are shut down in Seattle and things like this.
I did not know that. Wow.
So it's a hassle.
It's a hassle.
Yeah. I mean,
Interesting.
it's become a reality. Anyway, I
do find it tricky, Dan, because I feel like mainstream media has lost a significant amount of their credibility lately. So it's hard to understand what you should believe.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, well, that's obvious with this coronavirus, right? I mean, they're clearly trying to fan the flames of panic, right? I mean, they're not.
I don't know. Are they? Well, I guess that's what they do anyways.
Openly, they need clicks. It's not about headlines now. It's clicks. So
but there's always the chance that they're actually on the money when they're screaming.
Yeah.
We should panic. They might be right, but it's hard to tell.
Yeah, and there's different reasons to panic. Like, I don't believe you know what I mean? Like, healthy people are not much at risk. And thankfully, it looks like kids aren't at risk from coronavirus. Like, they're not.
That's what I heard. Yeah.
Young kids aren't responding badly. So you don't panic for that, but you could panic for other reasons. You could panic for if you're on a cruise ship and you could get like the quarantines. The reason I don't want to go to Seattle is not I'm scared of getting coronavirus. It's that I don't want to get quarantined or
I wouldn't want to get quarantined.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Get the flight stopped. Or like everyone on this flight has to stay with us for now, or
you got to sit on the tarmac for 2 weeks.
Yeah,
that would be.
Who even knows what they'll do?
Yeah.
So there's different ways. What depends what you mean by panic. And there's like retirement communities where they say like you're only really at risk if you're 70 and up or immunocompromised. And like my parents down in Naples, Florida, are like, well, that's everyone in this whole city. You know, so they're like down there, they're all panicked.
Scary. Yeah. Yeah, that is scary.
Yeah. But I mean, it's not. In the end, it's still just like a flu, from what I understand, right? It's basically the flu. I haven't heard any numbers that say it's significantly different. It might be. I think everyone's not that sure.
I think it has some difference with your respiratory system. That might be a little bit more virulent.
Well, so here's an abstract point that I was thinking about for this. And everyone falls into this mistake, including me, and I will in the future, even after talking about it, which is I think in the back of everyone's mind, you think, so what's the answer? Like, so someone knows the answer, and what is it? And the truth is, with many things, or almost all things in life, nobody knows the answer. So you sort of feel like, so is it more dangerous than the flu or not? Like, what's the answer for that? You think you can get on Google and find out, but it's like nobody knows.
No, I think the only way you could determine that is after it's spread a significant amount, you just calculate the mortality rate of the people infected and compare that to the flu, and then there's your answer.
And right now, nobody knows that.
Well, I think the World Health Organization yesterday published that it has a mortality rate, it seemed high to me, of 3.4%.
But again, it's difficult because they're like, it depends, where
it
is and where, who's been infected. And then you've got all the people not reporting it, right? Like all the people, they don't know how many people really have it.
Right. So they probably are pretty accurate about the number of people that have died, but the number of people infected, that's probably a harder number to measure, I bet, right?
Right. And everyone sort of thinks that number is out there somewhere, but it's not. I just think that in life I come across
It's a
that
moving
a lot.
number, yeah.
Sort of like we've talked in here about nutrition and things like that, and you sort of feel a lot of times it's like, so what is like somebody knows the truth of this, right? And very often it's like nobody knows. It's like can be shocking. Like nobody really knows what the truth of these things are. And you sort of go through life thinking like, well, some expert knows, right? And it's like nobody knows. Remember, this may be a weird example because it's so different, but there was that oil spill in the Gulf. And it was like, well, what's going to happen? Like, is it going to just fill the Gulf? Is it going to destroy Western Florida? Is it going to, what does the oil do? How is it going to spread? And it was like, it slowly dawned on everyone, like, nobody knows what's going to happen.
Nobody knows, yeah.
You know, you sort of felt like, all right, so what's going to happen? Like,
Well,
like there's some expert out there that's going to answer the question. And we always think that exists, but it often doesn't exist.
Not with unique situations. And then you can look at things exponentially. So when you look at things exponentially, then we're all going to die in a year. You know what I mean? Because that's the way exponential things happen.
I mean, like the way it's growing so far. Yeah.
And they just project it infinitely that way. And but things tend not to go that way, right?
Right. And also, it's always taking a sample and applying it to the population is always dicey. So you have like 3.4% mortality rate, and it's sort of like, well, who? 3.4% of who? And it can be like, well, if it's rural China, maybe they don't have the medical facilities that you do in other places. Or if it's like healthy people aren't reporting it, so it's 3.4% of the people that are showing up at the hospital who tend to be elderly or immunocompromised. So it's always dicey taking a sample and trying to push it out onto the population.
Right. I did hear there was some cruise ship where 700 people, I think, ended up getting the virus, and which is a pretty. I mean, you're a statistics guy. You could tell me that's not a bad number, right? To be operating from to give some insight. And as you said earlier, nobody under 70 died from it.
Right.
So,
how many over 70? Because that's the thing with people.
I don't know that number, but I think the number, the fatality number was less than 3.4% that was being reported. So.
Right. So I'm not surprised, but at the same time, you don't want to, there's, like I said, down in Naples, you're like, well, we're fine, only over 70. They're all like, well, we're all over 70.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Or like, well, I am immunocompromised, or.
If you're 71, you probably expect to live to be another 15 years or so, I would think. If you make it to 71, you're very likely to make it to 86, right?
Yeah, you're not like, it's fine if I get it because I'm like,
15 years of lovely retirement life. I mean, that's
there's lots of things like that. Like I hear, or even for our age, you know what I mean? You get people, you'll hear like, well, if you have a chest pain, but you're under 45, I'm sure it's nothing. And then you're like, wait, so if I get one, you know what I mean? Like, you're like, wait a minute. So it's not like, oh, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is not, the topic of today is not coronavirus.
There are a lot of podcast episodes out there that people are talking about coronavirus. I tend not to listen to them.
Well, they have to do one or the other. Like, it's either the panic or it's no worse than the flu. That seems to be the two like kind of wisdom that's being imparted that I hear. Like
I did listen to some expert, and basically, that's what he said. It's like we really don't know. Yeah. He said it's likely going to be a little worse than the flu, but we don't really know.
Right.
So this one guy I was listening to, I think the flu has a fatality rate of 1% maybe or something, which seems high anyways, right? But he was saying maybe this will be 1.5 to 2%. So I don't know.
Again, it must be so hard to get the numbers. Even the flu, like if you got the flu, no one would know, right? Like you just sit at home.
It doesn't seem right that 1% die from the flu, right?
They must.
Do you know anybody that's died from the flu?
No.
I don't either. So I don't
know.
I
mean, but how would anyone know that you ever had the flu? Like I've had the flu, no one knows. Like it's not in any database. I didn't go to the doctor.
Right.
So
that's a good point.
You know what I mean? No, all the people that are healthiest and stay home.
There's a certain amount of speculation going on, is what you're saying.
I would guess.
Yeah, definitely has to be. Yeah, I never tell anybody when I'm sick. Yeah.
So for me online, either I see people lining up, they're like, flu only kills 0.5%, and this is killing 3.4%. That means it's going to be 6 times as many people dead, like in some sort of panic, or people just waving it off saying, the flu, just yesterday, 10,000 people died of the flu, and there's only 40 deaths from,
You know what I did hear? That it's in Iran pretty strongly, I guess, right?
Yeah.
And
Iran, Italy, and some of the Asian countries.
So they were saying something like 6 members of the parliament of Iran have died from it.
I know.
Did you hear that?
Yeah, I heard. I didn't know it was 6. I knew that the health minister, I thought, died. Why did they have it? Like, of all people, like, why is it going ripping through their government?
So strange. I have no idea. And I think the Ayatollah is sick anyways, maybe with cancer. So they think if he gets it, he's gone. So really weird. When you start thinking about that way, where it's going to have a big impact on political leadership of a country, that's kind of scary, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm a little surprised. I would think, well, I guess that if you have sick or elderly leaders, which I guess we do, but
I think most people do.
You'd think in the U.S. they'd just be like, they'd rush to like the highest level medical care.
I would think so, yeah.
And it'd be hard to die, but
maybe.
Who knows?
Who knows?
I also don't want to be patient zero. Like, I don't want to go to Seattle and have like a mild case and bring it back and infect everybody.
I don't want you to do that either, Dan.
Yeah, it might feel a little bad. They're like tracing back, like, where did, like,
I always try
to me.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird concept, right? I'm not one of those guys that's I don't like to be too concerned about germs. Maybe I'm completely wrong and off on this, but people who are like, that don't want to touch people, that's a big thing now. You don't shake hands. I don't like that. I feel it's a little inhumane. I don't know,
I'm not sure how much it helps, and then you get all these things about people that get more likely to get sick because they've been sanitized their whole life, like from when they were little kids, and the little kids they haven't built up strong immune systems. And we have a large jiu-jitsu audience that really can't be too shy about like shaking hands. I mean, everyone's just jiu-jitsu is like the literal opposite, right? You're like rolling around, sweat literally falling off people into your eye, like things that just generally doesn't happen to most people.
Maybe. Yep. Maybe it's making our immune system stronger.
I feel like that's a part of jiu-jitsu I haven't really talked with anyone about, when sweat actually falls off someone down into your eye.
Dan, you've done more to discourage people to train jiu-jitsu than anybody I know.
I'm a realist.
Yeah. No, I hear you. That's why, you kind of want to be equally sweaty with your partner.
Right. That's the key thing. When you're equal, then you're like, look.
It all gets mixed together, and then you can just rationalize that that's actually my sweat. It's not his sweat. But when the other guy is completely drenched in sweat and you're bone dry, that's not fun. Yeah, that's gross.
Or I don't like being the sweaty one either, where you're like.
Oh, I don't care about being the sweaty one, yeah.
If the other person's bone dry and you're dripping sweat.
Yeah. It's going to help dry me off. But those moments when you know for sure it's the other person's sweat, it's a little gross. Yeah, I guess you're right. Yeah.
Anyway, coronavirus. So you can't be too much of a germaphobe, I would say, to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
No. Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I'm definitely not a germaphobe, but I must have a pretty good immune system because I don't get sick too often. I do my Wim Hofing almost on a daily basis. I strive to do it.
I'm getting more like I used to. I remember in the gym, like if my contact lens popped out and landed on the mat, there are times I'd just pick it up and put it back in my eye, like right from the mat.
Yeah.
Like, not wash my hands,
probably
not wash
not
the
great, right?
Yeah, and then from there I stopped doing that.
Yeah.
I was like, that's not right. I shouldn't.
I remember when I was married, my wife would occasionally get sick, or the kids would get sick, and I tended to not get sick, and my wife would blame me for everybody's sickness. She'd say, "You're the carrier." I'm like, "What are you talking about? I'm never the one that's sick, so I can't be the one spreading the germs around." But she was convinced that I was patient zero. Like somehow I would get infected only enough to transfer it to them, and everyone else would get sick.
I felt like I didn't get sick for like 15 years, and then I had kids. I guess this is a common story.
Oh, right.
And I was so convinced that I was like, I don't really get sick. Like people would get sick around me the same way you're describing it. Like, and I'd be like, well, I won't get sick, so it's fine. I'll take care of everybody.
Right.
And then one time I was like, my wife actually left town, and I was there with, we had one baby, and the baby was sick, and I was like, it's fine. I'll take care.
Yeah.
And then I felt like, my stomach feels a little funny. And then like cut to 2 hours later, and it was like the worst stomach flu. Just like I was just in miserable hell. Just like endlessly throwing up and just couldn't, and then the baby would be sick, and I was like, I have to go to the baby, and like I was like crawling literally from the bathroom into the baby's room. I was just like horrible, and like I was saying, it was 3:45 in the morning or something, just this horrible time when you shouldn't be up, and misery. So after that was the last time I ever said, like, I don't get sick. I shrug things off, So I'm not immune.
Do you believe in mind over matter?
Not really.
Not really?
I mean,
one time years ago, my wife made dinner for us, and it was like tuna steaks. So she made this big tuna steak and some side dish or something, and she gave it to me first. She's so sweet. And then I started eating it, and I was eating this tuna steak. I was like, this doesn't really taste right. I don't know about this, but I was like, but she made such a lovely dinner. I'm not going to complain. I'm from that old school. My parents are like that. You never complain about anything. You just eat it, And I was like, Then she came in and sat down, and she started eating it. And Dan, she literally, putting the second bite into her mouth, she jumped up and ran to the bathroom, and she was violently ill.
And you had eaten half a steak.
I'd eaten half of it. Yep. I said, uh-oh. And then I felt like a rumbling in my stomach, and it was like it was starting. And I just started focusing, and I said, nope, you're not going to get sick. You're going to be fine. Your body's going to handle this. And I just started this mantra to overcome it, and I didn't get sick.
It worked.
It worked. I was relatively fine, and she was wiped out for like 48 hours. Like she had to go to bed, coming out of both ends, and she had a bite of it, just like laid her out.
So you were good with like the salmonella or whatever it was.
I was good with this. So then we got a letter from, I don't know if it was BJ's or Costco's, like a few days later. It said, you bought some fish that had this bacteria in it, blah, blah, blah. And we were like, yeah, we know. Yeah. I don't know if they sent us a coupon or something. But
so that's why I said mind over matter works to some extent, but you don't want to try it with eat the other half of the steak. And then, you know what I mean? Like there's a limit.
There's a limit. Yeah, there's a limit. Yeah. All right, Dan.
Yeah.
So I prepared today, actually. I wrote notes, so we should get at it.
Stuff.
We started a little bit late. We talked about coronavirus, so we'll get in. So you know how we're always talking in here about, how to improve your life. If you want to lose weight, you want to make a positive change in your life. And we often talk about find your tribe. That's hence the name of our podcast here, Power of the Tribe. Well, I was listening to another podcast, one of my favorites, called Beat Your Genes. I mention it frequently. It has Dr. Doug Lisle on it, and they also have a new doctor, Dr. Jen Howk. So they're both, you could describe both of them as evolutionary psychologists. And I think they both were clinicians, so they've worked with people. Dr. Lisle especially has worked with people for decades in a lot of different ways. He's also a big advocate of eating healthy, and he helps people who want to make changes in that part of their life. And they were talking about habits, so it sort of overlapped some of the things that we've been talking about. And they were sort of looking at it from a completely different perspective. So you know how a lot of people say, all you got to do is change your habits. So if you're in the habit of eating a certain way, just get in the habit of eating another way. And that's all you have to do. And but that seems so hard. Like people don't do that. So why is it hard? Eating is one thing, you know what I mean? But then there's also exercising. There's all sorts of things that we say we want to do that we have trouble getting
All kinds
around
of
to doing it.
behavioral things too. That are,
That's it,
yeah.
all behavioral things. So another way to look at they were suggesting is we essentially do these cost-benefit analysis for all of our behavior, but we don't necessarily do it consciously. So, at some level, when you see somebody who's still smoking cigarettes or still eating junk food, they have decided the benefit of this outweighs the cost of not doing it. It's as simple as that, right?
Right.
And you can look at pretty much every behavior is that way.
Right. And to be clear for what you were saying, those same people might say, no, I really do want to quit smoking, or I really do. No, I really do want to lose weight. I really know I shouldn't be eating this. But you're saying it could even be subconscious where they're saying, some part of them is saying, I actually still want to eat it more.
Absolutely. Otherwise, they wouldn't, right? Like, you never are stuck in a bad habit of, eating cauliflower too much.
Right.
You know what I mean? That doesn't happen, right?
Yeah.
Because at some level, it's like, yeah, the benefit of this isn't that great. I'd rather have ice cream or pizza or something,
Right.
So it all comes down to cost-benefit analysis. And so the other part that plays a part is our personality. We've been talking about that the last couple of weeks, and where we've determined that both of us are pretty disagreeable people. And these scientists, and there's a group of people that think your personality really doesn't change. It's fixed throughout your life. It gets expressed differently depending on circumstances and context. You know what I mean?
Right.
So in other words, if you might be disagreeable, but if you're working a job and you really need the job, you might keep your mouth shut and not be so disagreeable to your boss to get yourself fired. You know what I mean? You might rein it in that context. But as soon as you're out of that context, you let your real personality express itself. So we have our cost-benefit analysis, our personality, and then what we talk about here a lot is our environment. You know what I mean? I talk about in my house, if I only put whole natural foods in my house, I don't have stuff that is less healthy for me, I'm less likely to eat it. You know what I mean?
Right.
And we talk about power of the tribe is our social environment. So when you're around other people who are living a healthier lifestyle, you're going to tend to also live a healthier lifestyle.
Right. So these things combine.
They all combine, So when we talk about this a lot, human nature is move toward pleasure, away from pain, and conserve energy. So those are the factors that you can sort of manipulate, perhaps, to change your cost-benefit analysis of some behavior that you're doing.
Right.
So, in other words, if you want to stop doing something, you may want to try to increase the cost of doing it. So, if I want to stop eating ice cream, I don't have ice cream in my house. Now I'm going to have to get in my car and drive down to the store and get ice cream. So that's an increased cost.
Take the handle off your refrigerator.
That's right. That's right. I don't have a handle on my refrigerator. That wasn't engineering. That was just happenstance. Happened to be there.
But it's the same principle.
Same principle. And I think some of these psychologists call that, I don't know why they call it this, channel factors, where you can make something easier to happen or more difficult to happen. And when you do that, you're just manipulating the cost side of what you're doing.
So we've also talked to a lot of the listeners are jiu-jitsu people, and jiu-jitsu again is very kind of strongly against conserving energy and staying away from discomfort, and you know what I mean. Like you need to.
So what you're saying is, if you practice jiu-jitsu, you're going to spend energy. You're going to be
it's
you're going to have a
exhausting.
certain amount of pain. Yeah. So the 2 out of the 3
Yeah.
you're experiencing. So why would anybody do jiu-jitsu, Dan, if it involves pain and spending of energy?
You have to emphasize the benefit, I imagine.
The benefit has to outweigh that, right?
Yeah.
That's exactly it.
Right. So you have to. So to help convince yourself to go, there's a few things you can do, right? You can try to emphasize the benefits to yourself. You can try to make it easier to go.
Yeah.
And there's, we've talked a lot about ways to do both those things.
Definitely.
On the podcast, right?
So another way to increase the benefit of a good behavior, so that's the other thing. You can make a bad behavior harder to do, so increase the cost of a bad behavior. For good behavior, you can try to increase the benefit. So apparently one of the benefits of good behavior is improved self-esteem. So if I say, I'm going to try to eat healthy for the month of March or something, and you lose 8 pounds, at the end of it, you're like, I feel pretty good about that. So that's an added benefit to the eating.
So we used to talk on here too about tracking our weight day in and day out.
Yep.
And I think that does both things, right? Like there's an increased
Definitely
cost. Like when you have a bad weekend and you're like, ugh, I'm up 7 pounds from
Yeah.
the weekend, it shoves the cost in your face.
Yeah.
And then the opposite, when you're healthy and then you see you've lost weight, shoves the benefit in your face. So I think that's how it's working. It's working for us for both the cost and the benefit sides of it.
I think so. Yeah. So there's your self-esteem, like how you feel about yourself. And then there's also esteem that you get from people around you. So like, I respect you. I care about your opinion. If I balloon up in weight and I'm telling you my weight, I'm going to feel bad about it. I'm going to go, Dan is going to think I'm a slob, and that's going to increase the cost of my weight going up. So I'm not going to like that. So
again, it's an intentional strategy in your case, though, right? You're like,
strategy.
I want to increase the cost of doing
Do you notice
this.
I didn't text you my weight this morning, Dan?
It was bad?
It was bad.
It wasn't good.
It wasn't good. Yeah. So I just
But that'll help you, right? That'll make you
me.
like, it's one more push.
Definitely.
Whereas if you don't, like I used to never weigh myself, and then you have got, those things are gone, the cost and reward.
Well, that's it. And, when I compete, so if I have a tournament I have to do out in the future, that really increases the cost of bad behavior because I don't want to miss weight. I want to show up and I want to be ready to compete. And if I'm not ready to compete and if I don't prepare right, my self-esteem is going to take a big, big hit and I'm not going to feel good about that at all. So that cost is usually enough to get me to do what I need to do.
Right. By way of advice, this is as a very broad framework. We're just saying for whatever goals are out there that people have.
I think so.
Try to increase the costs
Of the bad behavior.
And increase the rewards or make more clear the rewards of the good behavior.
Yeah.
Depending on, we're talking about a million different things. So
I think it's
it
really
depends on the
hard
situation, but
it's really hard to decrease the benefit of bad behavior. You know what I mean? Like if you really like to drink alcohol and you have a lot of fun, you sent me a very funny Onion article, by the way. That was really funny. Yeah. Then how do you do that? How do you decrease the benefit of that?
right, because
Don't they have some drug that alcoholics take? What is it
that
called?
makes you sick.
Yeah.
Right?
Do you know the name of it? No.
No, I don't.
Yeah. I
used
don't know
to. I used
anybody
to,
who
but
takes it, but I've used to hear about it. Yeah.
I've heard about it a lot. I've never heard of anyone that took it, but
So apparently if you take it and then consume alcohol, you get violently sick, right? You get completely nauseated. That would decrease the benefit of alcohol.
it's like I'm not willing to. That's what I'm not willing to do. Although the alcohol itself can make you violently sick if you
do too much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Take it to the extreme.
Do you remember the movie Clockwork Orange, though?
Yeah.
Like, isn't that how he was treated? It was like he was shown violent images and made to be really violently ill when he saw the images.
Is that what they did?
Yeah,
That was
so
a
then-
disturbing movie,
Right.
isn't
It
it?
was like one of those twisted movies.
Yeah.
So then anytime there was violence in front of him, he'd get violently
He'd
ill.
just freak out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he went from this violent street thug
Psychopath, yeah.
to this quivering
Yeah.
mess.
Yeah, that was the idea.
Such a weird movie, right?
Yeah, so I wouldn't maybe advocate
get-
for the Clockwork Orange approach, but
I don't think you can do it, right? Let's say I want to eat less ice cream. How can I take away the benefit
because
of
it's
eating
still
it?
there, yeah.
You can't, right?
Right.
You can only add to the cost of it.
So
I
then
think.
you add to the cost.
Yeah.
But this is the balancing act, right? And this is why we're saying, since you can't say one solution for a million different things, for every goal out there, but you can think to yourself, can I increase the cost? Can I use the cost, or can I increase the reward? Like,
Yeah.
how do I
massage that to
Yeah.
come up with a new CB, a new cost benefit analysis?
right?
You got to flip that number, and then you'll just do it, whatever it is, right?
Right.
Well, now that we're talking about it, Dan, now I know why people do jiu-jitsu. I'll tell you why. If I want to be fit and healthy, I could, run on the treadmill. I could bench press. I could do all that stuff. Or I could go do jiu-jitsu. And for me, I get the extra benefit of figuring out this puzzle that jiu-jitsu is. And I get the extra benefit of the camaraderie of all my fellow training partners and everything. So those are really good. I get to train with my son.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty damn good. So I get all of those benefits. Then it's like I'm really not working out at all. There's no cost to it, really, for me. So it's great.
And the cost of not going is always there because you get worse, like your skills deteriorate. And especially in comparison to other people who are going. That's a built-in cost where you just see people passing you.
Yep. And for me, Dan, that's typical what you just described. But for me, I want to be a good coach for my students and especially for my son. So, and these guys are getting so good that if I don't keep my learning process going, they're going to just go by me. Then how can I coach somebody if I have less information than them? I have less expertise. It wouldn't make any sense. You know what I mean?
And assume there's always new things coming up that you have you want to stay on top of.
Yeah, because it's still a booming sport. There's more and more people competing, so new strategies arise, new techniques arise, and I got to stay atop of it. So,
and I remember maybe a long time, 15 years ago, there were things changing already. Like from the original Gracie instructions, like pass doing this. Like there was one pass where it was like, well, you kind of. I think the original pass you kept an arm in, and it was like, well, they could just triangle you.
Right.
Like this was like 20 years ago. They were like, you don't really pass that way. You gotta.
Well, that's funny, Dan, that you should bring that particular example up because what I've noticed very recently is there's some techniques in jiu-jitsu that work amazingly well against somebody who's completely untrained, and then they don't work so good against somebody who's trained.
Right.
You know what I mean? And now I'm thinking, I'm not even going to show those techniques to my students anymore because they almost learn them and then they have to unlearn them.
You mean the techniques that work against the untrained?
Exactly. I'll give you a specific example, Dan. From top side control, most people will teach a white belt how to do a so-called paintbrush or Americana, they may call it, where it's a shoulder lock on their opponent. So in jiu-jitsu now, in grappling contests, you almost never see that at the higher levels.
Like on the forearm, right? You mean
on the forearm, exactly. So pretty recently there was a UFC fight where there was that guy, they call him the Beast, Derek the Beast.
Lewis?
Lewis, is that his name? Derek
the heavyweight?
Lewis? Yeah.
Yeah.
And, he's an exciting guy to watch. So he was fighting this, I think, Russian guy who was like a world champion Sambo guy. And they're two big bruises, But Derek Lewis, if he hits you once, you may never wake up. You know what I mean? So he's so dangerous on his feet. So usually the strategy is let's get this guy on the ground where he can't kill me. And so this Russian guy's a Sambo guy, world champion, Dan. So he took him down. He gets the side control. He tries to paintbrush the far arm. And Derek Lewis just bridges and rolls out of it and gets back to his feet. And then it happened again. So essentially, trying that technique allowed Derek Lewis to escape both times. And
I'm sure that grappling for the Sambo World Championship, the grappling gap between him and Derek Lewis is enormous.
It should be. And I mean, the guy's a world champion. You have to consider him an expert at grappling. Right. And he couldn't do it. So I think what it tells you is it's not an effective technique. So it's like I probably shouldn't even be teaching this to my students.
Well, it's a different, again, I mean, a lot of people know this, but a lot have never thought about it, is that jiu-jitsu was invented as like to be used against untrained opponents, right? It wasn't, you know what I mean? Like it was.
I don't know if it was invented that way, but it gained a lot of popularity in the first UFC. That was essentially it.
Right. That's sort of what I.
Royce was able to run through all these guys because they didn't know what the heck he was. We didn't know what he was doing. The commentators, the broadcasters watching it, they didn't know what he was doing. Right. It's really strange.
I remember Dan Severen. tapped into a triangle, and he triangled Dan
Yeah.
Severen, and no one knew why Severen tapped.
Yeah, they didn't.
They
know
were
why
like, I think he had his arm, or you know what I mean? Like the announcers were like, and I didn't know. I remember watching, being like,
what the hell
he
is
just
happening?
tapped, and it was like, is he tired? Why did he tap? And it was just a simple triangle, and nobody knew what it was.
It was like Magic, Dan, wasn't it? That's really why it caught our imagination, because we were like, I want to learn the magic. Show me the magic, man. That was crazy, amazing. One of his other victories, I think, maybe in UFC 2, was Royce went against this Japanese karate guy, and he kind of grabbed his arm, but I think he had his collar, so he kind of was in a armbar position, but he was choking the guy with his collar, and the announcer said, "Oh, he got him in an armbar. That's definitely an armbar." And you can see that the guy's arm isn't even stretched out, but his collar's wrapped around his neck. So they're calling the fight completely wrong because they didn't know enough.
And then a lot of people would tap, and you see this actually to this day with new people in the gym. They tap because they think they're being submitted when they're not even being, they don't even need to tap. You know what I mean? Like
Art Jimmerson, right? The boxer. Yeah.
He was just mounted, I think.
But I think people didn't understand what chokes and strangulations were. I think they feared that they might die. Like, Royce might choke me, and I'll never wake up again.
Right.
So he'd start choking them, and they'd start tapping furiously, right?
Yeah. And again, you don't even know. Like I said, you must see this with new people in the gym. I'd see it fairly often where they tap, and I'd feel like, no, that was just, you know what I mean? Like I was just holding your arm, or that was just.
That's
I just
probably not a bad thing to do if you don't know what the hell is going on.
Yeah, no,
I
I'm not
vaguely
criticizing,
remember.
You just see they don't know.
When I first started, I think Kenny Florian at Boston Brazilian Jiu Jitsu was a purple belt, and I think I was in his guard, and he just did a simple cross collar choke, but I didn't know what it was, and he just started choking me, and I was like about to go out. And I didn't realize, you're supposed to tap dummy when you're getting choked like this. Yeah,
You're doing the opposite.
Yeah, I was doing the opposite. Yeah.
That can be awkward too.
And actually, another time when I was a white belt, I was mounted, and a guy started doing the paintbrush technique that I was telling you. But this was from mount, and I just said, "Oh hell no!" and I just resisted. I just I thought I was in an arm wrestling contest, and my elbow went pop, pop, pop. My elbow popped hard like 3 times, and then my elbow was screwed up for like a year, I think, or something. Yeah.
I've had that. I've been on that side of. I remember getting that same thing, the Americana from Mount.
Yeah.
On someone new.
Yeah.
And they refused to tap, and I'm like, what do I do here? Like, at some point you're like, you have to let it go. I'm not sure you have to let a choke go. I mean,
it's funny, those twisting techniques like the Kimura and the paintbrush, if you want to call it that, they're very difficult for beginners because there's no visual cue that you're at the end of your joints mobility. Right. You just have to feel it. And the person applying it, they can feel tightening it up. But if they're also a beginner, they might not know that the other guy's at the limit. Where if you're straightening somebody's arm out, you get that visual information that the arm's getting straightened.
The heel hook's even worse, right?
Heel hook is subtle movement. Yeah, very subtle movement. So it's hard for people to understand it. Yeah, tricky. Yeah.
So overall, I would say it went from, here's a way to defend yourself against untrained people. Now it's more of a, everything being taught, being adjusted to, you assume the other guy's trained.
Yeah, or the other guy's an expert.
And then there's things going on. I'm probably losing the thread of, like, in the last 5 years, I feel like leg locks are becoming more of a thing, and
leg locks are big.
Guards are appearing. And
leg locks are big because in 2017, Gordon Ryan went to ADCC. That's the big no-gi championship that happens every 2 years, Dan. Mm-hmm. And he just leg locked everybody, and these world champions, and he smoked everybody. And the guys who were competing against him, many of them were competing in the IBJJF that does not allow heel hooks. So they were less versed in defending them. So they weren't ready for those attacks. Now there's been adjustment. So in 2019 at the ADCC, there were still leg lock finishes, but fewer, and there were more rear naked choke finishes, I think. So, yeah, there's been adjustment in the game.
It's always evolving.
Yeah, and when rule sets change, that dictates what happens to the game. Yeah, yeah,
I guess all sports are evolving.
definitely.
You know, so,
Right? Like they moved the extra point back now in
right.
football in the NFL, and guys are missing that.
Well, it's a
kick
passing game now compared to when we were kids.
Yeah.
And basketball's a 3-point shooting game now compared to when, a couple of days.
Man, I noticed that. I don't watch the NBA much at all, but last time I watched it, it's just, get down the court and huck it up.
Right.
I mean, somebody just throws it up, and if you get hot, you blow the other team out. If you get cold, you get blown out. It's weird, right?
Yeah.
I think it's less interesting, but who knows? Maybe I'm an old curmudgeon. I don't know.
Yeah. Who knows? Baseball, the starting pitchers go 6 innings now. So it's all the sports keep evolving, right? They keep changing.
Yeah. Yeah. Somebody
jiu-jitsu
figures
is
out a
no
winning
different,
strategy. Yeah. Well, I think strategy is very important. If you have the optimal strategy for the sport, then you can focus your training on that strategy and be more efficient in your training. So I think it's very important. But it seems like in most sports, once somebody figures out the optimal strategy, somebody comes up with a unusual new strategy that seems to be in the context more effective, and then that stimulates more change, right?
Yeah. Would you also agree, though, that like preparation for optimal performance at a competition would be different than just general training? Like you might be like, I don't really want to work on certain things because I know I'm not going to get there. You know what I mean? Like you might not want to work on learning about specific guard or something when you're like coming up on a competition because you're like, I need to zero in on what I'm going to do, and I'm not going to end up in that. Like
not so much that, but yeah, if you're going to compete, then you're going to have an optimal strategy, and you're going to work on your personal strategy. And so you're not expanding your games per se. You're tightening up and sharpening what you're already doing and what you already know. So yeah, but I will say, we got some guys competing Sunday. Kevin Malloy, who's a white belt, Justin Cosgrove, who's a white belt. Good guys. They're competing Sunday in a tournament, and there's one guarantee I believe about competing in jiu-jitsu: you will improve. You'll get better. You just can't help but get better because it just brings such a focus to your nervous system where, you have that potential cost of embarrassing yourself. So you just sharpen yourself up. So I used to be more relaxed about this, but I used to think, competing's not for everybody. But now I'm feeling like everybody should probably try to compete, even if it's really hard for them, because some people have a nervous system where it's more anxiety producing for them, but they should probably try to do it. It'll make them better at jiu-jitsu, and it'll probably make them better at handling their anxiety too. So,
and do you think the key improvement is in the preparation, or do you think there's also a ton of like just from the experience of the actual match?
I think both, but probably the preparation mostly, of course. Yeah. There's a point where you want to think of it all as preparation. So this brings me to a different idea, Dan, or something along what you're talking about. Like when I'm coaching my son, the last tournament I was at, he just recently got his purple belt, but he was a blue belt. And I think he won the blue belt gi. I think he won the blue belt open weight, which is pretty cool. And but as I was watching his match, I wasn't. I want him to win, of course, but I felt that if he doesn't win, it's not that big of a deal because we're not here to win blue belt tournaments. We're doing all of this so he wins black belt championships. And there's something about that shift in perspective. We've talked about this on several episodes, where if you can shift to that very long-term perspective, it makes things in the here and now much more manageable. Like it doesn't. I think it improves your performance because you're like, you can just focus on the jiu-jitsu. There's almost like no bad news. So if somebody catches you in a submission and you have to tap, then you're like, great. Now we know we got to fill that hole. We got to work on that,
Right. So you're saying for anyone out there practicing jiu-jitsu, the idea is to have the long-term goal.
I think so.
Even if you think like everything I'm doing is to be a good black belt. So don't worry about what's happening to you now.
Exactly. Like I think Dennis Medina is planning on competing, and I think I told him this. If I didn't, I meant to, and I hope he hears it here. I think his goal should be to be a Masters world champion black belt at whatever level he's at that point. And this is all just a step in that direction and part of the process. And I think if he can embrace that, he's going to have the best outcome by far.
I remember with this podcast, without even a specific goal, when we just like episode 1 or 2, somewhere around there, we were saying, let's just picture doing 100 episodes.
Yeah.
So then don't worry about what's happening now, or, you know, like don't worry if this one went well or the next one went well, or
it's all a
how
process.
many people listen to it, or just any of those things.
Yeah. It takes the jitters away from you, right?
Yeah. To just
And here we are. I think this is episode 73 maybe or something. So we're well on our way.
So we should have gotten better by now, actually. So
that is so funny. Somebody recently said, I watched the first episode and that's my favorite. And I was thinking,
thanks.
I don't know if I consider that a compliment.
Maybe we need to now picture 1,000 episodes just to ease off.
Maybe,
again.
yeah. Joe Rogan has over 1,000 for sure. But I like. What do you think of that idea, Dan? That I want my white belt students to think, depending on how old they are, that they should be shooting for black belt world championship.
Does it depend how old they are?
Well, I was going to say masters,
right,
but some of them might be young enough that they won't be masters when they become black belt. I like that because I think as a coach, you do want to show your confidence in your students. Like when I think of my history of sports and martial arts, I've had some good coaches, but I haven't had a lot of great coaches. You know what I mean? And I've had some coaches that have not shown enough confidence in me, and I think it hurt me. You know, I think if I had a coach that was more enthusiastic, that, you know, we talk about the ego trap, like you can get stuck in the ego trap, but I'd rather resist the ego trap than somebody dampening my own enthusiasm.
So the only exception I could think of, so I guess any white belt you could talk to, like maybe you can be black belt champion someday. But I'm picturing, here's the only exception, so this is only a small group, but someone that say, not that small though, say they're a blue belt, so they know Jiu Jitsu, and they're sort of not that athletic, not that good at it, and they're like, in my own gym, the other blue belts are beating me. Maybe the goal, then you say the goal is black belt world champion, they might think, and say they're 22, so they're really in the thick of like the real killers. They might be like, that's a little too far for me.
That's too much. It's not credible.
Yeah.
And then I'm losing credibility as a coach. I think you're right. Yeah. I think I probably have to choose that.
But it could be just a little tweak, right? It could be like you're working to being a good black belt.
Yeah.
Right. Something that you think's very impressive goal.
A tournament winning black belt, not a world championship. Right. You're going to win a tournament as a black belt. And I think that's probably available for most students because, especially with the gi, jiu-jitsu is pretty technical. It's not basketball or football where, you know, all we have to do is measure your 40-yard dash or your vertical leap and we can know your limits. Right. It's different. Those things, at least right now with the gi, they don't apply as much, I don't think.
Well, I think it's fair to say, tell me if you disagree, that in jiu-jitsu there are some very, very good accomplished people, or just forget even accomplished, just very, very good black belts that aren't necessarily that athletic.
I think I agree.
That would be different than football, or you know what I mean? Like
totally
you basically
agree.
have to be freakish. No one is going to be an accomplished NFL player that is not a freakish athlete. You know, like it doesn't matter how hard you work.
Dan, we were watching the combine last week. Remember that? They get these guys that are 340 pounds doing the 40-yard dash in 5 seconds. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's bizarre. You can't.
Yeah.
I was just
you can't fake that. You can't finesse that.
There's a well-known clip that just popped up on my Facebook again from a few years ago, but it was some wide receiver who I don't even think is particularly good, but he's running at the end zone and he's almost there, and one of these lightning fast defensive backs launches at him, and the guy the wide receiver launches himself, kind of flips over the guy, maybe gets clipped a little bit by him, but does like a front, like on the spot.
Front
the guy's
flip.
launching, but front flip, but really high in the
Yeah.
air, like over the diving guy.
Yeah.
And like completely flips and lands on his feet, and then just like stands up with the ball and runs around. And I was like, the athleticism here is just.
It's
I
like
sent it to-
Crouching Tiger. It's like this.
I
It's
sent
like
it
they're
to a
on
friend
wires.
or someone. I
Makes
was
no
like,
sense,
man,
right?
you feel unathletic looking at that stuff. You know, it's like, look at that. The
Unbelievable.
guy did, and you know, he's just some middle of the road wide receiver. And so, but the point is, jiu-jitsu is different. I don't think. I mean, there's freakish athletes and people that are really, really good at jiu-jitsu or have a knack for it. But I think at least it's fair to say maybe not world champion level, but you can be very, very good without the athleticism.
Yes, I agree.
Or natural strength or any of these kind of.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, Dan, I think we've come up on it. I think it's time to
Wow.
wrap it up, man. That hour flew by.
Did we get to your stuff?
We got to most of it. We're thinking about the cost benefit and trying to manipulate the cost benefit of good and bad behaviors in order to get to the behavior you want. And the other point I wanted to tell people about is, you know, think about the added benefits. So I want to call out Justin Cosgrove. So he's listened to the podcast, Dan, and he came up to me and he said, I'm doing your diet. He said to me, like, I have a diet, which is, I guess, eat meat and vegetables and fruit or something. So he said he did it and he lost 8 pounds in the first week.
Yeah.
So kudos to him, man. He's going to be a good jiu-jitsu player. And he's a white belt right now, but he's got a great attitude. And if he starts eating healthy, the sky's the limit for the guy because he's already good. So
Let me just one more quick thing
Yeah.
that might be inspirational for some people. Wouldn't you say, because you've been in jiu-jitsu a long time now, that almost any time that I hear you say, I think this person is going to be really good, it's their attitude more
Yeah.
so than like, oh, this guy's strong as an ox or this guy he's
Dan,
a
that's
great,
an
right?
excellent point.
Yeah.
We got another student, Dana Sharpton, who's a white belt, and I get to train with him on a regular basis. And I said to him the other day, "You're a black belt at being a white belt." And what I meant is he just has a very excellent attitude, and it enables him to learn quickly because he's not suffering any self-esteem damage if he gets tapped or swept or whatever happens. I don't know how he does it. It must be just his innate personality, but he just comes in focused with the right amount of intensity. He's trying to make the techniques do the work. He's not trying to make his own natural strength or speed or anything do the work. And he's not exceptionally strong or explosive or fast anyways, naturally. And he's learning really quickly. And, yeah, it's all attitude, basically. Yeah, definitely.
And would you say it's also fair that that's a balance for newer or I guess for anybody, is that balance between intensity in your training, but yet shrugging off a bad result? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, so
Absolutely, yeah.
which can be hard because if you're intense, then it seems like you go intense, then you lose and you slap the mat, and like it seems to go with that. So it's finding that balance to be like,
Yeah.
I want to keep,
I think the key, another way to describe it is he's making the focus the technique, not himself. So then the results aren't really a reflection on you, they're a reflection on the technique. So then it's easier to learn and adjust. So yeah, he's doing an exceptional job at that. So great for him. So that's about it, Dan. Yeah, we're at the time.
you ran
Great
out.
podcast. Yeah, so everyone please share this. Please, please, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you haven't subscribed yet,
This is the new push.
you
It's a
gotta
click.
do
Isn't
it.
it a click of a button?
click of a button. Then there's another little button, Dan, it's the shape of a bell, and you got to click that. So if you click the little bell, you'll get notifications when our new videos come up, because you don't want to miss a new video. I'm going to be actually adding other videos with technique and actually some jiu-jitsu specific things for people that I think they're going to find super helpful.
And no downside, really, right?
No downside. Right now we're at 472 subscribers. We got to get to 1,000 subscribers. So that's what we're pushing for. So please, everyone, please subscribe. Tell your friends to subscribe. And that's about it. And we'll talk to you next week.